Somewhere between who you were and who you could have been stands a silent figure. You, the one you abandoned. We spend so much of our lives apologizing to others for being late, for forgetting, for messing up. But let me ask you a question you may have never dared to face. When was the last time you apologized to yourself for giving up on your own greatness? You see, the greatest betrayal is not of others. It's when we betray our own potential. When we doubt our worth, settle for less. And let fear drive the car while we sit in the back seat of our own life. This message today isn't about business. It's not about money. It's about that quiet war inside your mind. The one between the voice that says, you're not enough, and the one that whispers, you were made for more. So today, I invite you to do something radical. Not for the world, not for applause, but for you. Make this comeback a personal apology to yourself. And from that apology, rise. You know, one of the most painful yet powerful days of my life was the day I looked in the mirror and finally told myself the truth. Not the sugar-coated version. Not the one I used to sell to friends or family. No. This was the truth stripped bare, the kind that doesn't flinch when you see how far you've drifted from who you were meant to become. That kind of honesty stings at first. But let me tell you something. That sting is the beginning of healing. Asterisk. Asterisk. It's the beginning of a comeback. Most people don't make progress because they've made a habit of lying to themselves. They say, I'm doing okay, when their bank account says otherwise. They say, I'll change tomorrow, when they haven't changed in years. But change doesn't begin tomorrow. It begins the moment you stop pretending. Asterisk. An unexamined life is not worth living. Asterisk, said Socrates. And how many of us have been sleepwalking through years of unexamined habits, unchallenged excuses, and untapped potential? I remember sitting in my small apartment, bills piled on the table, and realizing something startling. I had created that reality. Not the government, not the economy, not my boss, me. I had to own that truth if I was ever going to earn the right to change it. That's the first step in making your comeback a personal apology to yourself. You must be truthful about how far you've let things slip. There's no wealth without truth. There's no progress without clarity. You don't need to announce it to the world, but you do need to confess it to yourself. Admit that you've been drifting. Admit that you've settled. And then forgive yourself. Because once you're honest, you're free to choose a new path. Not the one built on denial or distraction, but one paved by decision and discipline. Every great turnaround begins not with a plan, but with a moment of truth. That's the moment where the tide starts to shift, not out there, but in here. And when the shift happens inside, nothing outside can stay the same. There's something deeply humbling about realizing that the person you've neglected most isn't a friend, a spouse, or a business partner. It's you. Not the you others see, but the you filled with promise, purpose, and potential. See, most people think apologies are reserved for others. But let me offer you a new thought. The most overdue apology you will ever make is the one you owe yourself. Asterisk. Asterisk. And not for being imperfect, but for settling far beneath your own greatness. I remember a time when I had a calendar full of idle days. a wallet filled with excuses, and a head full of dreams I never dared to act on. I drift through routines and obligations, knowing deep down I was meant for more, yet doing nothing about it. That kind of inner neglect builds up over time. It turns confidence into hesitation, ambition into anxiety, until one day, you don't even recognize the person in the mirror. So one morning I stood there and said it, I'm sorry, not to anyone else, just to me. I'm sorry for not taking you seriously. I'm sorry for abandoning the gifts you were born with. I'm sorry for not believing in what you could have become. That moment wasn't emotional. It was transformational. Why? Because the instant you apologize to yourself, you reclaim something sacred, your right to start again. Marcus Aurelius once said, asterisk, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Asterisk. You see, the real tragedy isn't failing, it's abandoning your attempt to grow. It's watching years slip by as you cheer for others, but never step onto the field yourself. And you can't buy back that time, but you can redeem what's left of it. By owning the truth, offering yourself forgiveness, and rising with the decision to never walk away from your own potential again. One of the heaviest burdens a person can carry is not debt, or failure, or even loss. It's shame. That quiet, persistent feeling that whispers, you blew it, and you'll never recover. Now, I've known failure. I've faced disappointment. But nothing held me back more than the weight of my own judgment. And it wasn't until I forgave myself that the dam finally broke and the flood of progress began. Because let me tell you, you can't run towards your future while dragging the past behind you. Asterisk. Asterisk. Self-forgiveness isn't about pretending mistakes didn't happen. It's about choosing to no longer be defined by them. Asterisk. To err is human. To forgive, divine. Asterisk, wrote Alexander Pope. And I'd add to forgive yourself is freedom. Without it, you stay stuck in cycles of self-sabotage. You make a little progress, then guilt creeps in and pulls you right back into old patterns. But the moment you say, I release myself from my own condemnation, you unlock momentum, real, powerful, forward-moving momentum. I remember one young man who came up to me after a seminar. He'd wasted years chasing shortcuts, lost his family's trust, buried in debt and doubt. He asked, how do I ever come back from this? I said, you start by forgiving the man in the mirror. Until you do that, every step forward will feel like walking with anchors on your feet. And when he finally did, the change was almost immediate. His posture shifted. His decision sharpened. His belief returned. Because self-forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it breaks its power to dictate your future. You see, guilt is only useful when it leads to correction. Beyond that, it becomes poison. And some of you have been drinking from that cup for years. But today, right now, you can put it down. You can say, yes, I've stumbled, but I am not the sum of my stumbles. I am the product of my decisions, and today, I decide to begin again. Because the second you truly forgive yourself, the road ahead clears, the noise dies down, and your comeback picks up speed like never before. You know, you can attend all the seminars, read all the books, write out the finest goals with gold-inked pens, but if you still see yourself as small, undeserving, or incapable, none of that effort will stick. Because here's the truth. You will never outperform the image you hold of yourself in your own mind. Asterisk, asterisk. And until that picture changes, nothing else will. There was a time I tried everything to change my income, my habits, my surroundings, but I was still carrying the belief that I wasn't cut out for success, that I was destined for just enough. I thought success was for people born with the right connections, the right talents, the right background. And as long as I carried that belief, guess what? I kept proving myself right. Opportunities would come and I'd shrink. Challenges would arise and I'd fold. Not because I couldn't succeed, but because I didn't believe I belonged in the winner's circle. Asterisk. We are what we think. Asterisk, said the Buddha. Asterisk. All that we are arises with our thoughts. Asterisk. That means if you want to elevate your life, you've got to elevate the way you see yourself first. You don't change your bank account by chasing money. You change it by changing the person earning it. You don't fix your relationships by changing other people. You fix them by becoming someone who sees themselves as worthy of respect and love. I once mentored a man who had everything going for him: intelligence, discipline, even opportunity. But he kept sabotaging his growth. When we dug deeper, he revealed he'd been told as a child he'd never amount to anything. And he'd carried that echo into adulthood. Until he rewrote that inner script, success kept slipping through his fingers. So today, I urge you redraw your self-image. Not based on where you've been, but on where you're determined to go. Picture someone who's capable, deserving, resourceful, someone who can rise from mistakes and still build something extraordinary. Because once you begin to see yourself as powerful, you'll start acting like it. And when you act like it long enough, the world begins to agree. We tend to think of comebacks like movies. One big speech, one defining moment, and suddenly everything changes. But that's not how real life works. In real life, a comeback isn't built on some grand explosion. It's built one quiet decision at a time. Asterisk. Asterisk. It's not the lightning strike. It's the daily spark. Asterisk, asterisk. The small, deliberate choices you make long after the excitement wears off. When I started my own turnaround, there was no dramatic scene, no thunderclap, just a simple day, a quiet room, and a choice to stop drifting and start building. That first morning, I didn't conquer the world. I just woke up an hour earlier and read a book. The next day, I knocked on one more door. The day after that, I made one more phone call. None of it made headlines, but each choice compounded. And that's where the change began. Epictetus said, asterisk. No great thing is created suddenly. Asterisk. And yet we expect overnight success, instant results, and magical transformation. But that's not how wealth works. That's not how growth works. It works like this. You plant, you water, you wait, you tend to the soil, even when you see nothing breaking the surface. Then one day, without fanfare, something starts to grow. I once met a man at a leadership workshop who was in the middle of a financial crisis. He wanted a breakthrough, a miracle. I told him, miracles are usually made out of habits. I asked him, what did you do today that moves the needle even 1 inch? He paused. Nothing, he said. That was his answer. but it was also his starting point. The next day, he committed to making one wise decision a day. Track spending. Read a chapter. Make a call. By the end of the year, he wasn't just out of crisis. He was mentoring others on how to rebuild. You see, your personal apology, your comeback, it gains power, not from intensity, but consistency. A new life is built in the quiet minutes where no one's watching and no applause is coming. But you keep going anyway, because one small decision each day stacks up into something unstoppable. It's strange how easily we become our own worst enemy. We speak to ourselves in ways we'd never dare speak to a friend. We criticize, belittle, and second guess every move we make. And somehow, we convince ourselves this is discipline. But let me tell you, constant judgment doesn't build champions, it breaks them. Asterisk. Asterisk. If you're serious about a comeback, then you must stop treating yourself like a problem to be fixed and start treating yourself like a partner worth investing in. I learned this lesson the hard way. I used to think that pushing myself harder, scolding myself for every mistake, was how I'd improve. But the harder I pushed, the more I cracked. It wasn't until I made the shift from harshness to support that real progress began. I asked myself, what if I started encouraging myself the way I encourage others? What if I became my own greatest ally? That shift in mindset didn't just help me perform better, it helped me become better. Asterisk. Plutarch once said, asterisk, what we achieve inwardly will change outer reality. Asterisk. And it's true. When you begin to believe in your worth, when you start treating yourself with dignity, something changes. You start taking bolder action. You stop negotiating with fear. You no longer wait for others to validate your potential. You validate it yourself. And that kind of inner alliance, that's rocket fuel for your journey. I think of a man I once mentored who had failed in business not once, but 3 times. Each time he came back to the table with less confidence, more fear. His inner dialogue was brutal. You're a failure. You're not cut out for this, I told him. You're not failing because of lack of talent. You're failing because of lack of support from the man in the mirror. He changed how he spoke to himself, started tracking progress instead of perfection, progress instead of punishment. Within 18 months, he built a thriving business and said the turning point wasn't a new strategy, it was the day he became his own ally. Because once you stop tearing yourself down and start lifting yourself up, there's no limit to how high you can rise. So here we are, standing at the edge of a new chapter, not one written by fate, but by choice. You've heard the voice of your inner critic long enough. You've carried the weight of regret far too long. But now you hold the pen, and the story from this moment forward is yours to write. Not out of guilt, but out of growth. Not from pressure, but from purpose. Let this be the day you stop waiting for permission to rise. Apologize for every time you abandoned your potential. And forgive yourself completely from that place of truth, of grace, of renewed self-belief. Build, asterisk, asterisk. Decide that today marks the beginning of your comeback, not for the world to see, but for you to believe in again. Start with one decision, one promise kept, one step forward, and watch how quickly the tide begins to turn. Because once you stand on the side of your own greatness,